You know, it almost feels like yesterday. It was the Champions League semi-final in 2010, and Inter was about to play against Barcelona at the Camp Nou. One last obstacle for Inter to reach the elusive Champions League final they've been waiting for since 1972. That's a very long time ago, and Inter was not gonna miss the chance to taste another final. That being said, this was a prime Barcelona of Pep Guardiola, arguably one of the best club teams ever assembled. No one was expecting it, not even the most optimistic of Inter fans. But Inter and Jose Mourinho pulled through and made it to the final. It was an iconic moment when Mourinho ran on the Camp Nou pitch after the game. It was a perfectly executed plan against a prime Barcelona of Pep Guardiola. A victory against all odds versus one of the best teams in modern history, while going down to 10 men. I gotta admit, even as a Milan fan, I was moved by the way Inter were spitting blood against Barcelona. That night, Mourinho took Inter to the Champions League final in 2010, their first Champions League final in decades. And in no time, Inter were the champions of Europe after winning the final against Bayern Munich. That night, Inter could do no wrong. They were on the roof of European football. This could have been a step into Inter returning to their dominance in Europe. That being said, time hasn't been too kind with Inter. You see, after that magical night, Inter fell into a long and painful decline. A decline that included mid-table finishes, 6 years away from the Champions League, and at one point, 4 managers in one season. So I'm making a series called Surviving the Banter Era, where we talk about every club's banter era. And we do that with a smile. I already released the first episode on my beloved Milan. If you're an Inter fan watching this, you'll probably enjoy watching our misery on that one. And this time, we're gonna talk about the other side of Milano, our beloved cousins in blue, Internazionale. In this video, I'm gonna have Uncle Sharma on the channel. He's one of the best Inter fan channels on YouTube. Hell, even as a Milan fan, I'm a regular viewer of his videos. I'm gonna leave his channel in the description below. We're gonna talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of Inter's banter era. And we're gonna do that with a smile. But the question is, where did it go wrong for Inter? And how did Inter fall into this horrific banter era? Well, to get to the bottom of it, we gotta go back. All the way back to summer 2010, when Inter were the European champions. It's summer 2010, and Inter are the champions of Europe. But not only that, they also won the Serie A and Coppa Italia as well. Winning the treble was a brilliant achievement, but there was an elephant in the room, one that had to be addressed. What was the sentiment after that Champions League final? Did you really know that Inter is about to enter a long decline? Did you see the writing on the wall, or did you think that this is going to be the first of many European victories?
I think, you know, in that time, as you said, we were on top of the world, on top of Europe. It's hard to even think after that, but there was the sobering moment straight after that, which was Mourinho. As soon as we achieved the treble, the Champions League, Mourinho, the famous image of him leaving the Bernabeu in a taxi, him crying with Materazzi. So there was already that happening in the background where we couldn't even celebrate, fully, and then there was that happening where our treble-winning, historic manager is leaving us just a few hours afterwards. But obviously, bro, you could never imagine that whatever happened a few years after, that's what would happen. There was a feeling of, uncertainty. But as I said, at that moment, we were still like, yeah, we've got a really good squad. We'll be all right, even without Mourinho.
Jose Mourinho left right after that Champions League final to Real Madrid. And on top of that, Inter's aging squad was reaching the end of their cycle. A squad regeneration was really needed at this point. Inter looked east and west to find a successor for the great Jose Mourinho. And they settled on... Yep, this guy. I mean, replacing a prime Jose Mourinho with this guy was like replacing this guy with this guy. Rafa Benitez was appointed to continue Inter's success. After all, most of the pillars of that treble-winning squad was still there. And they started alright, I guess, with 3 wins in their first 4 games setting the tone for the rivals. But then, trouble started to show, and after winning the Club World Cup in December, he was gone after going public against the club's policies. Not a good idea.
Hasta la vista, baby.
But would it be fair to consider the Rafa Benitez era as the start of the banter era? what was going on with the fan base? Did they accept Rafa Benitez as the continuation of Jose Mourinho?
Yeah, I think I was younger back then, so obviously social media wasn't as prevalent, so it's hard to gauge exactly what the general Interista feeling was around him. But I was skeptical of Rafa. Obviously he was a Champions League winning manager, so he had a good CV. He's not like an amateur or like a Primavera coach type of guy.
Yeah,
but
unfortunately that came against us.
yeah. No comment. But but his personality, or he's never really had charisma, even though he's got a really good CV. He's never had a really good charisma. He's not very likable, I would say, and then there was rumors even as soon as he came in that he was having clashes within the dressing room, that he came in and there were posters up of Inter's Champions League win and treble win around the training ground or the dressing room, and apparently he came in and said tear those off, or allowed to have these kind of images around. He was rubbing the players the wrong way as soon as he came in already. So those doubts and uncertainties around Benitez were confirmed. So yeah.
Wow.
And I think it wasn't just the Benitez thing. It was like that summer as well. A new coach comes in and he wasn't really backed. We had an aging squad, and he wanted to kind of change it around. And he wasn't really given the opportunity to do that.
Despite sacking Rafa Benitez, the season was not over, with still so much to play for. With caretaker manager Leonardo, the former director of PSG, Inter still salvaged a second place in the league and won the Coppa Italia. Honestly, not a bad ending in a season when they sacked the manager. Things would change in the next season though. Inter started the season with Giampiero Gasperini, yes, the current Atalanta manager, before sacking him in September and replacing him with Claudio Ranieri, who didn't even make it to the end of the season. Yep, quite far from the most stable of projects. After some mixed results, Inter hired their third manager of the season, but he wasn't just any manager. You see, while Inter went to one extreme to trust the experience of Ranieri at first, this time they chose to go to the other extreme end and chose their youth coach Andrea Stramaccioni. And the bizarre thing was, Stramaccioni was only 36. He was literally younger than few of his own squad players. The results on the pitch were not great for Inter, but there was a larger elephant in the room that Inter had to deal with, an aging core of the squad who won so much for the club, including their treble in that 2010 season. In one summer, Lucio, Julio Cesar, Maicon, and Ivan Cordoba all left the club, and Wesley Schneider would soon follow in the winter, while Zanetti, Cambiaso, Chivu, Diego Milito, and Walter Samuel would all depart the season after.
Why, God, why? We had a deal. Let the others grow old, not me.
How did you feel about Inter's next chapter after all these legends left the club?
I guess fresh start, fresh clean slate. Because a lot of them, as much as I love a lot of these guys, like Maicon, Lucio, Cordoba, they were, in our treble era already. They were already, you could say towards the end of their peak for sure. That's why Benitez wanted to have a overhaul of the squad. It was definitely needed. So. Obviously sad to see when some of these big names, historic names, are leaving, but at the same time it was kind of about time without being too harsh on them.
So Lucio, Ivan Cordoba, Maicon, Julio Cesar. Man, this guy's actually literally called Julius Caesar. That's mad, actually.
Yeah, I actually never realized that until now.
Yeah. I'm actually reading my notes. I was like, wow, that's, because I am into history, just looking at his name, that's mad, actually.
I never noticed that until you pointed that out now. Yeah, his parents, interesting choice.
So do you think there was an element of, these guys overstaying their welcome, whether, by the request of the club or by the request of themselves?
I think the Moratti ownership, it was very much the old school Italian, president, like you guys know, like, Berlusconi and the Gallianis, like, you just get, if the president likes you, if you had like one good season, you just get a new bumper contract for no actual,
Yeah.
no logical reason. Even though if you're 33, they'll give you like a nice 2-3 year contract, even though you probably shouldn't. So yeah, there was definitely, it's harsh to say overstay their welcome, but there was definitely the lack of, being ruthless maybe at the right time. But at the same time, Moratti didn't have money anymore. We didn't have the money to sign, I guess, good replacements for these guys. So maybe to them, it just made sense to get these, the usual Italian thing, continue with the experience, rather than, gambling on some younger players. So I think it was time to go. It was time, as Claude from Arsenal fan with TV would say, it's time to go.
Time to go!
The sudden departure of all these legends left a massive hole in Inter, one that the club would not recover for a while. And it didn't really help that Inter allowed Felipe Coutinho to leave for a very low fee, just to watch him turn into a world-class player in Liverpool. Unsurprisingly, Stramaccioni was out of his depth in that season, finishing 9th in the table. Let me repeat that again, 9th place! That's almost the middle of the table, even below Catania, who are in Serie D right now. How far was winning the next league title for you guys when you guys finished 9th in the table, or even, dare I say, a Champions League qualification? Was there a light at the end of the tunnel? Like, was this the lowest point of Inter's Banter era?
I think that was the lowest, but then it didn't feel like it. It felt like, whoa, could this get even worse? Like, could we go even further down? But there were like little flashes of hope. We had Coutinho at that time. He was a young talent. We signed Kovacic as well, who I still really love, and I would love to see him return to the club one day. So there was like these little flashes. Rodrigo Palacio, who was like, just like a little shine in a complete, dark period. So there were moments of hope and light, but at that time, as I said, because the money was running out with Moratti, it just felt like, whoa, like what's gonna happen with us?
The wheels of decline were in motion, but there was a major news in the corner. Much like my own Milan, Inter's owner could not keep up with the financial demands of modern football. After nearly 2 decades of owning Inter, Massimo Moratti's colorful era was coming to an end, as he sold a majority stake to Eric Thohir. Times were uncertain for Inter. Say what you want about Massimo Moratti's efficiency of spending, but one thing's for sure, no one could argue about his passion towards Inter. Was the new Inter gonna be a soulless commercial club with football taking a backseat?
Yeah, I think you could see, football, I think around that time in general was changing to be, more commercial in general. So there was definitely that fear. And then, the owner that did come in, Eric Thohir, we didn't know too much about him. He came from Indonesia. He claimed to be a Serie A fan, and he said his favorite Inter player was Nicola Ventola, which I guess he was trying to pose himself as like a hipster. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
he made it clear when he came in that we were shambles financially, and he was just he first of all, his main mission was to sort us out financially. And I agreed with him. At that time, I was in university, I was studying business and finance and stuff like that. So I was like, someone needs to actually make us solidly, or like a club that's solid financially first before we can start thinking about competing at the top level. So I knew it was going to be a tough few years under this new ownership, and it was.
Well, there was a new owner in town, but Inter's troubles continued. And remember that young coach that Inter hired? Yeah, he finished 9th in the table and was gone by summer. And so did his replacement, Walter Mazzari, by November. At this point, you'd be forgiven to think that Inter was no longer just in a bad period. Much like my Milan, they were going full steam ahead into a full-blown Banter era. At this point, Inter was getting further and further away from their glory years. That being said, there's an interesting second coming from the glory era. And no, it wasn't Jesus. But given their situation, it was the closest thing Inter could get to the return of Jesus. Inter hired Roberto Mancini for a second spell at Inter. Now, I'm not a fan of my soup being reheated, But I gotta admit, this was an interesting appointment. You see, many moons ago, during his first stint, Mancini won 3 league titles and 2 Coppa Italias, or 2 league titles, depending whether you ask a Juve fan or an Inter fan. And he didn't start too bad. A 1-1 draw in the Milan derby was a decent place to start. But Inter finished 8th in the table, and we're looking at another year completely out of Europe. That being said, Inter were happy to give him a full season, and it paid off. To his credit, Mancini took Inter to 4th place, their highest position in the past few seasons. For once, it actually looked like there's light at the end of the tunnel. It looked like he was ready to get Inter back to the top. But it all changed again when he left by mutual consent right before the start of the next campaign. And he was the first of what I would call the year of 4 emperors. This was the year that Inter went through 4 different managers, including Mancini. Well, Mancini was gone, and the season was just about to start. It was a new season and a new manager. Inter was looking to build on their 4th place finish from the last season, and they hired Frank de Boer, fresh from winning 4 back-to-back league titles with Ajax. At the time, Frank de Boer was a respected manager from the Dutch league, kinda like Erik ten Hag these days. So this was an interesting appointment by Inter, one that was expected to take the club to the modern era. With de Boer, Inter was gonna show the whole world what they're made of. And he was gone by November. By then, Inter was 12th in the table and was in the bottom of their group in Europa League. They even lost to Hapoel Tel Aviv. I mean, who does that? Frank de Boer. I gotta admit, when you guys announced that, I was actually afraid. Like, at the time, I really respected this guy. So 2015-16, Frank de Boer was, I would say, what Erik ten Hag is today. You know, like, he had multiple Dutch championships, he played exciting football. So when you guys announced that, I was like, oh, shit, you know, this is the guy, you know, this is, you know, that's a good appointment.
I think he was just, yeah, you know, as you said, it may be, or like, you know, on paper, it sounded good. But first of all, he didn't have, you know, even a proper preseason. So a manager like that with new ideas, can't speak Italian, you know, is not familiar with the Italian culture. He needs time, and you know, he got the short straw there. Like, you know, coming in, Mancini, tumultuous summer, comes in, only has like a couple of weeks to prepare before the season starts. So already, you know, I was already not particularly confident. And then yeah, he himself, you know, as we saw later on in his career, maybe the hype wasn't you know, deserved, because he showed that he's not very good man manager on like a, you know, human basis. Obviously he tried, you know, bless him, he did try to learn Italian, but he became a meme because he was trying to, you know, force himself to speak Italian in the interviews and stuff, but it just became, you know, 2015-16, that's when memes started to be, you know, a thing. And he was, you know, becoming a meme. And yeah, you know, I think, you know, foreign managers in general in Italy struggle. I think he didn't adapt to the Italian league. So yeah, I think by November, I think, yeah, I actually gave him more time than I remember. He was gone in November, so they did try to give him some time. Yeah,
it felt like September. I don't know, like, it was like, you know, we
beat Juve. That was his moment. Like, we beat Juve at home at the San Siro. That's his like crowning moment. That's probably why he got so much time.
you know that meme that, you know, I think it's a South Park meme, you know, like, and it's gone. Like, that's what I remember when I remember his time, you know, like, I'm here and it's gone, you know, this thing happened and it's gone. And there it was. Inter was back again on the market looking for another manager.
Oh shit, here we go again.
And they settled on Stefano Pioli. Yep, the same Stefano Pioli that won the league title with Milan. Pioli showed a lot of promise, and they even went on a mad unbeaten run. Pioli was on fire. Pun severely intended, by the way. But then, results went off the rail. After that mad run, Pioli went to the other extreme and lost a lot of games. Up until when Pioli was dismissed as well, and a caretaker manager finished the season in an abysmal 7th place. And after the year of 4 emperors, or shall I say 4 managers, Inter was back to square one again.
Yeah, I think he was Pioli. I like the period under Pioli. His downfall happened after, yeah, as you said, we were going through a period of like winning games in a row. We were looking good. Then we won this game against Atalanta at home 5-0. Which funnily enough is like how you guys, funny, now that I think about it, it's like the moment that you guys woke up and became the current Milan, when Atalanta beat you 5-0. But anyway, we beat them 5-0, and yeah, we just collapsed after that. There was, you know, how people used to call it, there used to be a saying about Pioli high. People used to say, you know, Pioli's teams, you know, even the Lazio, Bologna, like they always go through, you know, really good periods, and there's just some sort of collapse happens. And that's what happened at Inter. We were on track to make the Champions League pretty much, but then something just happened, and he collapsed, and then yeah, he was let go. But you could see, yeah, there was definitely good signs from Pioli. Maybe he did deserve, you know, more time, but yeah, it didn't work out. And by the end of the season, I think the last few weeks of the season, we hired just a caretaker, the Primavera coach Stefano Vecchi, who took over for just the last few weeks. So yeah, that season technically we had four managers. We started off with Mancini, then De Boer, then Pioli, and then finished off with the caretakers.
That's actually mad. That being said, Inter had ambitions to get back to the Champions League again, and they just hired the man who was, let's just say, a serial Champions League qualifier. Enter Luciano Spalletti, and he did just that. Well, just that. You see, it was the last game of the season, and Inter was locked in a tight race with Lazio for that 4th spot. And in that last game of the season, they needed a win against, well, Lazio. So yeah, with the Champions League spot on stake, it was an all-or-nothing game for both teams. And just to add a little bit of spice, all eyes were on Lazio's star defender, Stefan de Vrij, who already signed for Inter next season. Yup, talking about conflict of interest. By halftime, Lazio was winning 2-1, and Inter needed a win. Not even a draw was enough. That being said, Inter came back to win it 3-2 in a hotly contested game that had a penalty and 2 red cards. And Stefan de Vrij? Well, he was the one who committed the penalty and was at fault for the winning goal as well. So yeah, think of that how you want.
Yeah, no, bro, that going into that match, the hype was crazy. It was our biggest match in, like, you know, since probably, you know, since like 2011 or something, because, you know, since we won the Coppa Italia, there was nothing to really, we were playing for nothing. So that felt like, you know, a cup final, because Lazio themselves could have got to the Champions League if they won that game. So it was literally like a Champions League playoff.
Or a draw.
Yeah.
Or even a draw.
Yeah. Oh yeah, even the draw would have done for Lazio. Yeah. So it was the hype was crazy. And you could see the pressure even in that game was so, you know, we call it Pazza Inter because Inter just like, they can't do games without giving us heart attacks or like ups and downs. And yeah, even that game we started off completely, you know, we went down to Lazio. Felipe Anderson was having one of those games where he always has against Inter where he looks like prime Ronaldinho. But we managed to turn it around, and yeah, when Vecino scores that goal, bro, my goodness, I still got goosebumps because I'm just like flying around the room, you know, top off and throwing it around. Oh, it was crazy.
As you should. You should. How much do you buy into all these, you know, Stefan de Vrij controversy? Like, is there any substance to it? Because looking back, like, okay, as a neutral, looking back into it, I don't think he was that bad. Like, it's not like he shot the ball to his own goal, you know? Like, that's what I was expecting. I didn't watch the match, but when I heard that, I was like, oh, he probably did something really wrong. And then when I watched the highlight, I was like, you know, this is 50-50, you know? It could have been an honest mistake.
Yeah, no, I think that conspiracy theory definitely was very, you know, prevalent back then, and obviously you can't blame people. But I think that was, you know, Inzaghi, our current coach. I think he shouldn't have played. He just shouldn't have played De Vrij in that game. You know, he's a professional, De Vrij. I don't believe in the conspiracy theories. I don't think he went out there to, you know, play against Lazio or for Inter. But at the same time, it's the team that he was going to play for next season. He was literally, you know, he was not going to play in the Champions League if he made, you know, Inter lose. So at the same time, I just think, yeah, he shouldn't have played. And yeah, as you said, like, you know, he gave away a penalty. It was, you know, bad challenge, but it can happen. You know, we've seen top defenders do that on, you know, other big moments. But I just think Inzaghi shouldn't have played De Vrij that game. It was too much, you know. What's the word I'm looking for? Like when you've got a collusion of you know, something that you want and something that there's two things that you want, but
like that meme where you have the two buttons that you have to press and you don't know which one to press. I don't know, what was that meme called?
Yeah, he's sweating and he's like,
yeah, that one.
League with Inter, Champions League with Lazio.
And that was it. After 6 years of absence, Inter was back in the Champions League, something that they will repeat again in the next season as well.
I see revival, revival, revival. Look again, look again.
A year later, they hired Giuseppe Marotta as their CEO, the architect of Juve's dominance for nearly a decade, and would soon win the Serie A again in 2021 under Antonio Conte, their first title in 11 years. These days, Inter's Banter Era seems to be long behind them, although you never know how close we are to another Banter Era. Even as a rival Milan fan, I want to see a strong Inter. It's just better for the league, better for Italian football. Honestly, I can totally relate to what Inter fans must have felt during their own Banter Era. After all, we were going through our own Banter Era in a similar timeline. It'll be interesting to see where this project of Inter would go in the near future. I guess only time will tell whether they'll make a giant leap forward or a massive step backwards.